from a yes to no.
A joint public hearing of the City Council and Planning Board was held in Council Chamber on Monday, April 9th, 2018 at 6 p.m. for the purpose of discussing 5 separate amendments to zoning to include Amendment Zoning Section 3.0, Table of Principal and Accessory Use Regulations, amending Scrivener's errors from 2009, recodification, including allowing a dwelling above a first-floor retail, service, or office in B1 zone, allowing by right clubs, indoor commercial recreation, service, plumbing, carpentry, sheet metal, restaurants, manufacturing, storage, research development, and adult daycare in industrial zone. Also, allowing by special permit outdoor commercial recreation and accessory structures in industrial zone. Amending zoning section 3.2.5, swimming pool to require fencing. Amending zoning 4.1.1, table of dimensional requirements, establishing number 1, max height of fences, and 2, dimensional requirements for B1 zone dwellings. Amending zoning section 10.0, definitions relative to dwelling unit, rooming, boarding, and lodging house, general service establishment, assisted living residence, site plan review, and zoning board of appeals. Amending zoning section 8.4.9, parking requirement subparagraph 4A of the NRCC zoning district to require 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit. Notice of this meeting was posted on March 21st, 2018 at 3:23 p.m. and advertised in the Salem News on March 26th, 2018 and April 2nd, 2018. Absent so far is Councilor Dibble, who said that he is on his way. Councilor Beth Gerard, that's me, presided, and if the planning board wants to introduce themselves. Well, from planning and from the city, I also want to acknowledge that we have Tom St. Pierre, our building inspector. We have Tom Daniels, the planning director. We also have Ashley Green, staff planner. And then Helen, I guess we can start with you.
Bill Grissett.
Kurt Reader. Carol Hamilton. Dale Gale.
Thank you. And so I was thinking if anybody would disagree or hopefully agree that we'll take the easiest ones first. Ideally, I think the swimming pool fencing one should most likely get that one done first. So Tom, if you wanted to step up to the podium to start to review, and then just a reminder for everyone that this is a public meeting. This is being recorded on SATV. If you, when I call on you to speak, when you raise your hand and I'll call on you, when you come up to the podium, you'll give your name and address for the record. There's also going to be a sheet there that you can write down so that the acting city clerk can then record your information correctly into the record. Tom and Tom.
All right, so you got Tom and Tom instead of Tom and Jerry tonight. But, so this is the recodification work goes back to 2009, and a number of these items go back to that time period that we just wanted to clear up. And I'm going to turn things over to Tom because he was has been actively involved since that time. And the first one is dealing with the swimming pools.
Yeah, the swimming pool one is pretty straightforward. The codification or recodification document left out some language which was subsequently challenged by a resident all the way to city council. I've never seen it before, but they somehow got a hearing before this board. And the board upheld the fact that the city intended to put that language in there. This is providing a pool fence around the pool area, and it was simply omitted in the 2009 document. We'd like to see it put back in there, because we still occasionally get a challenge to it.
And let the record reflect that Councilor Dibble is joining us. So are there any questions from council members? Seeing none, any questions, comments from planning board members? Any comments from anyone in the public appearing in favor? In favor, Polly? Okay. So no one in favor, and then opposed? Polly? Do you want to approach the podium and then state your name and address for the record?
So Polly Wilbert, 7 Cedar Street. So my concern is about the process. I went back to the minutes. I saw no record of discussion about this item. during the 2009 process, on both the planning board side and the city side. My concern is whether or not this restricts to a single gate in that fence, and whether that is something that if someone, for a variety of reasons, whether it's a storage area for chemicals that they might have in an outbuilding or something, whether having a second gate is in fact permissible, or whether they'd have to go before the zoning board of appeals to get permission for a second gate. If the gate is lockable, why couldn't you have more than one gate? But once again, I'm concerned about the process, that this is being called an error when I saw no evidence that was even discussed at the time. And I would be for more than one gate for either the business or the homeowner to have access where they needed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do either of you want to respond to that as to?
In the past, when we've had someone that's needed a gate, perhaps to get a vehicle behind the building or something, this is really for homeowner pools, this is not for commercial pools. In the homeowner pool scenario, as long as that second gate was padlocked or something that was a sort of a permanent lock, we would let that go by. The intent was that the person gate or the people gate swing closed behind it to keep toddlers out of the pool area. That was the whole intent of that language.
Okay. Anyone else have any further questions? Councilor Milo?
Thank you, Madam President. I have a basic question. What's a Scrivener's error? How do we define a Scrivener's error? I always thought it was you leave out a 2, or you put an extra 0 at the end of a number, and I'm just looking to correct a Scrivener's error in this. It's this whole paragraph. So I think maybe before we go any further, we need to be able to define what that is, what we're correcting here. Does that make sense?
Sure. So, Councilor McCarthy, did you have your hand up?
Nope.
Okay. So typically, as you know, when we've done, when there's been various Scrivener errors, like on something that we got in our packet or something that was on the agenda, that it was a correction because of an error that was accidentally omitted. I mean, this is not something that was willfully omitted. That was as part of a vote. So this is really just, this should have been included and it wasn't included accidentally. Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam President. If I may, simple question. Mr. St. Pierre, before we recodified in 2008, they reorganized the zoning book to make it more quote-unquote user-friendly. Was language like this in the zoning ordinances relative to offense?
It was.
And somehow it wasn't, when we recodified, somehow it was not? And
Correct.
so we're just putting back what was in prior, there was no formal vote taken one way or another,
Not to my knowledge.
omitting it?
Not to my knowledge.
Thank you. That's a Scrivener's error.
That makes sense to me.
So it's pretty basic. I mean, if I may.
Certainly.
When we talk about Scrivener's errors, the zoning book is a book that we've all been through. We've all been through meetings like this, but when we recodified in 2008, the interesting thing about it was my wife had me cleaning out one of the back rooms in order for the kids getting ready to come home from college, and I had a filing bit, and I came up across the file of 2008, that's zoning recodification. It's a file about this thick. It's sitting on my desk now. I was like, ooh, maybe I might have to reference that after this meeting tomorrow. But all that being said is, in 2008, when we went through this whole process, the process in 2008 was to take the zoning book and make it more user-friendly, basically. Put things in tables and make things so that anybody who had never been to a zoning meeting or never looked through the zoning book would be able to easily access and understand what was allowed, what was permitted, what wasn't permitted. And Mr. St. Pierre's, as he just said, and I talked to him earlier about some of these things, that these were things that were in the zoning, had always been in zoning, and somehow in 2008, when they tried to pull everything together and make it, and put it in tables and make it quote-unquote more user-friendly, some of these things were inadvertently left out, or somehow they didn't reflect what the zoning was prior to 2008, before we recodified. This is just to get it back to what it was. Period, in a sentence. No one in this room took a formal vote on changing anything that's in front of us. This is in their opinions. So I mean, some people may look at it and say, what's in front of us this is a change. If it was before 2008, it was in the zoning, and that's the way it was, and now we're moving forward after recodification, if it doesn't reflect what was prior to 2008, it needs to go back. That's what this is.
Any other?
I'm
Counselor
okay.
Sargent?
I don't remember discussing this on the zoning review board at all either. I think it's something that makes sense to have fences around pools. And I thought it was in the zoning, so this is pretty simple. This doesn't give my biggest worry is something that would give development rights to somebody that might not as we go forward. I don't think anybody has any question about putting a fence around a pool. So I think we're in pretty good shape with that one.
Any further discussion from councilors or planning board members?
Just for the record, it was section 710 of the old zoning ordinance, and it was subsection F, safety precautions, so it was clearly in there before. As I said, it was subsequently challenged by a resident here, I don't know how it got here, but it came to the city council, and city council upheld that they preferred to keep that language in there.
Thank you.
We already kept it in there a while ago then, so it's already back in?
That's not really a formal process. Somehow they got here and appealed our denial of a pool permit over that section, and they argued because it wasn't in the book, and the council actually took the vote to uphold the language, that it was not the intent of the council to eliminate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further, Kurt?
Could you please clarify, are we being asked to consider this precise language, or will it in fact be sent to the planning board for deeper deliberation, modification, and brought back to the council? And by nodding, I assume yes.
Yes, that we're sending it to you to do your thing.
Because there are several things, if I may.
Certainly.
Is a fence defined elsewhere in the code, in any ordinance, as to what construes or comprises a fence?
If I could, through the chair, the previous section that I just quoted actually talks about pickets and stockades or chain link type materials, and it says excludes rail fences, so there is some language about the type of fence.
Understood, but there are several aspects which are not addressed, such as anywhere a fence is placed, the openings cannot be greater than 4 inches so that a child does not get his head caught. That's a basic ADA issue. No openings under the bottom of a fence could be equal to or greater than 4 inches as well. That's not addressed in anything in this language. And I would submit that any gates, whether it's 1, 2, or 3, needs to be self-latching and self-closing as well, so that you don't have that gate.
That language is in there. Yeah.
That's all.
Okay. Seeing no further, Councilor Dibble.
Thank you, Madam President. Arriving just a few minutes late, but I think I got the gist of this whole thing. Can we just briefly talk about the 25-foot rule? I'm sensitive to this matter. My wife's sister at 25 years old drowned, and when I purchased my house, it came with a pool. And I met with the building inspector back at the time to make sure that what I had was legal and in compliance. And if it wasn't, I was going to make changes. I had to make changes. But 25 feet on any side from the pool is not what I have and what I got approved for my house. And I know that a lot of other people have fencing around their whole yard, but not 25 feet from the pool. It's further than that. The fence goes around their entire backyard with a gate, etc. So now we're asking to change that to 25 feet to what it used to be. Is that correct? If I can ask through
Yes.
the President?
Yes.
Yeah, the language before talked about the 25 feet. In reality, as long as the yard was fenced in, we were okay with it. We looked at what the intent was. I think the intent was that the fence not be so far away that it's not effective. But certainly we can enforce it exactly the way it's worded.
In a sense, as this is written, I would be required to have 2 fences around my pool. One for the yard to keep my dog in, and one around the pool, which I don't want a second fence. And I'm sure most people that have pools don't want a second fence in the middle of their backyard. So I asked the planning board to come think about that in your deliberations. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have a fence 25 feet from your pool when you have another fence another 25 feet away.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Council McCarthy? It's listed as you two.
Well, the list is me?
Yeah,
How that?
you're the winner.
Chicken dinner, I'm the winner. Okay, so we're at the first one, section 3.2.5 swimming pools, required fencing. I move that the hearing be closed.
Councilor McCarthy moves that the hearing be closed. All those in favor? All those opposed? Matter carries. Council
I
McCarthy.
further move that the matter be referred to the planning board for their recommendation.
Council McCarthy moves that the matter be referred to the planning board for their recommendation. All those in favor? All those opposed? Matter carries. Thank you. Where do we want to go now? What do we think is going to be the most?
We thought that would be easy.
Okay, so we're done. Okay,
How
okay.
about 4.1.1?
The next page. Okay, does anybody, or? This is the
Fencing,
dimensional
fencing,
requirements for the max height of fences.
Amending zoning section 4.1.1, table of dimensional requirements establishing 1, max height of fences, and 2, dimensional requirements for B1 zone dwellings.
Tom and Tom.
So again, this was, this is not, unlike the previous one, this is not 100% Scrivener's errors, which is why we didn't describe it as a Scrivener's error. But the height of the fences was an omission that we're looking to correct here, and we're not talking about section 10 changes, correct?
No, we're talking 160, this one? Just 4.1.
This 4.1.1.
Great, all right, very good. And so what this is doing is it's adding the notation that fences shall be no more than 6 feet for residential uses and 10 feet for commercial uses. It's also under section 4.1.1, also under dimensional requirements, adding a new notation that all dwelling units constructed in the B1 zoning district shall comply with the dimensional requirements of the R3 multifamily residential zoning district. So this is something that was lost in the codification process. Did you want to add?
If I could add on to that, the loophole that was left, or the omission that was left, was that the B1 district had no lot area per dwelling unit specified, and that's what we've been struggling with. So someone could potentially buy a B1 and have bought B1 properties and added as many units as they can find parking spaces for, with no restrictions on it, other than the parking.
Talking about fences, right?
No, Tom just finished up with the through you, if you don't mind. Finished up on the section talking about the B1.
Okay.
Fences were an omission in the codification.
So we have two parts then here, correct? No, it's just this section here, correct? Because it says to the max height, okay, so the max height of fences, which is the table, correct? And then the dimensional requirements for B1 zoning.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions from council member? Councilor Terrio?
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, I'll just say this is a situation, the lack of any restriction that was in for dwellings in the B1, that was a situation that we had to deal with last year. As you councilors who were here last year may recall, we had to change the area. We changed a block of properties that had been B1 to R2 in order to get control over the dimensional requirements, which we did not have under B1.
These were the ones that were in your ward,
Yes.
correct?
So that was the driver for that particular operation. So right now, we don't have any real restrictions on the B1 as I understand it. Any realistic ones other than making sure you have enough parking.
Okay, any further council members?
What
Councilor Sargent?
what is, how many units per acre or per, how many square feet per units is the R3 saying now?
If I could, the 3,500 square feet, I believe, is the dimensional requirement per dwelling unit in the R3. I'll check that for you, but I believe that's it.
And if I can, Councilor Sargent, were you finished?
Oh, sure, no, I just want to ask, I mean, as opposed to if we allowed R2 dimensional requirements, what would be the difference there?
It's
7,500.
7,500 square feet in the
So-
R2.
So there can be a debate as to if you're going to allow dimensional requirements, you could allow R3, but you could also allow R2, right?
If I could, the reason we're addressing it in the manner that we are is that the previous book it was a very funny book. It would allow uses from the B1 would refer back to those uses allowed in R3. So we were expecting that the R3 dimensional things would follow along with that. I mean, we could rechange the dimensional regulations all over this book, but that'd be rewriting the zoning. We're just trying to get in what was missed, we feel, in the
Right.
codification.
We just have to take a good look at before and after, what was allowed before we did the recodification, and where and if any errors were made, and do we like the errors or not? So, sometimes you like an error that's in your favor. And
Councilor Terrio.
Thank you, Madam President. I would surmise that in this particular case, we do not like the way that this one has broken since the recodification, because we previously had a restriction on B1. If I understand that B1 was referred to the dimensional requirements of R3, and right now we have B1 referring to the no dimensional requirements whatsoever, which means that you can pretty much do anything you can fit on the lot so long as you can fit the cars on it too, or find a place to put the cars. So I'm okay with going back to the way it was in that regard. But I get the reference to B2 as well.
Any further comments, questions from councilors? Planning board members? Anyone at this time? Okay, so anyone appearing in favor? No. Okay. Do you want to come up and, you got to come up and speak so we can record you. And make sure you give us your name and address for the record.
Mike Becker, 2 School Street Court. I was the person that owned the property he referred to last year at 76 Leach Street. That was B1 zoned at the time of my purchase. I'm opposed to this change, and part of the reason why is I'm sure you're all familiar with all the development that's happened on Bridge Street Neck. That was a B1 zone. Previously, it was one of the most run-down streets and areas in the whole town, and now it's probably the highest dollars per square foot selling condos in Salem, and that the city has spent a ton of money on sidewalks and lighting and kind of cleaning up that neighborhood, and there's been developer investment there to match that. It's become a really nice neighborhood, and that would not have been possible without this Scribner error, loophole, whatever you want to call it. I look at the zoning and I see that B5 has no minimum lot size per dwelling relative to each unit. So if the B5 has no minimum lot size per dwelling, I don't see why the B1, how is this any less beneficial? I'm not going to continue with the rant that I texted you earlier, but it certainly encourages people to buy up properties that are in rough condition, and there is still some restriction there in that you need the minimum 1.5 cars per unit in order to put the dwellings in. So that's my disposition.
Thank you. Anyone else speaking? Are you speaking opposed?
I'm speaking.
Okay. Why don't? Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure. Let's do Councilor Terrio, and then I'll have you come up. How's that?
Sorry. Just a follow-up question for Mr. St. Pierre, if I could, quickly to what Todd said. So in a case like that, would that be something where a hardship variance would be something they could come to grant if they had a size requirement issue there? If these dimensional requirements were putting a burden on a particular plan to do a development, is that something they could come to the ZBA for a variance on?
They always can ask. The variance standard is rather difficult to get to, but they can
Sure,
ask.
but it's not taking away the by right does still leave a venue potentially.
It does.
Hang on, Mike. Hang on.
I want to make sure of that, because there should probably be a process by which, and I don't know if if the appeals process is the best word, however, but there should be a process in this so that we can look at projects, case by case, because Bridge Street Neck is a very good example of a place where we made improvement. A lot of the developments that have happened on Bridge Street Neck have been in relatively dense pockets, but they have resulted in improvements to the street. I know one of the other things we take up is the fact that businesses can be on the ground floor in a separate matter here, but, so I mean, there is some validity to definitely to that. But I don't want, I don't think we should leave B1 as something that's unlimited, but at the same time, because that's what it effectively is now, but we should have some mechanism ultimately in our zoning to allow us to look at these.
Could I counter?
Yes.
My counter to that is, what our attempt is to get some regulations in. At any time, this board and the zoning planning board can revisit any dimensional table anywhere in here, process, whether it's a special permit or something along those lines. Non-conforming structures often are allowed to change by special permit to another non-conforming use, so you're not shutting down all venues. But what the attempt tonight is to try to just get some brakes on some things that are a little bit out of control, get this back to fix the document, and then certainly if you want to make some changes down the road, that's the purview of both boards.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then, ma'am, you wanted to speak? Yes, you can come up to the podium.
Barbara Clary, 104 Federal Street. I wasn't planning on speaking in this order because I didn't quite understand how this was going to be run. So I don't want to speak about Scrivener's errors at the moment, but this seems to me to be a little the cart before the horse, because first you have to accept that the R, the residential, and a B1 was the Scrivener's error, or you have to accept the fact that it's an amendment you want to make, and I don't think that decision's been made yet. So it's perfectly reasonable to me that there wouldn't be dimensional requirements for residential uses because there were no residential uses allowed in the zoning code as published. So I think you should regard this as, if we are to have residential in B1, what do we want for dimensional requirements? And my concern is that if the height requirements, which I believe would go from 30 to 45 in B1, or maybe 50, and that is a significant increase. These are neighborhood establishments. I think I would really like the planning board to take a really close look at that and see if that's appropriate. And I would also ask that the public hearing for this particular question remain open, because it's I think it's a really important question. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mike, I'll entertain this once.
Pardon?
I'll entertain this once.
I would just like to say I kind of agree with her that 45 or 50 feet is kind of ridiculous, but currently it's only 30 feet. It's actually less than the R2, which is pretty restrictive. In addition to that, I'd like to say that the B1s are often for the entrance corridors, which are houses that are, zero lot line, they're on the street, they're already pretty dense. If this restriction is put in, it's pretty much going to eliminate the B1s that are left of adding any units, in that it's rare to find anything that's over 10,000 square feet of a lot that is not already 2 units. So basically, you're talking about you'd have to have 10,500 square feet just to put a 3-family in, which is not really in keeping with like the character or the neighborhood around it, pretty much anywhere in Salem in the B1 zone. That's all.
Thank you. Okay, Councilor Sargent, and then John.
As far as in a B1 zone, if you have business and housing, each one requires a different parking. The housing, 1.5 unit spaces per unit, and the business, so many spaces per square feet.
Right, depending on the business.
Now, that will be total, meaning adding the business to the residential. There won't be spaces that you can use twice, once for business and once for residential, right?
My interpretation of that is you need to provide for all those parking spaces, or you need relief from the zoning board.
So it'll be a total.
If it was going to be a mix or a blend like that, they would need relief from the zoning board.
Right, so hopefully what you would ideally be looking for is whatever amount of spaces you need based on square foot of business, then add on the 1.5 per dwelling unit to have a total. And unless, otherwise they would need a variance, right?
Right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, said Jen could speak next, and then, okay. So Jen, yes.
Jennifer Firth, President of Historic Salem. I'm sorry, I'm just wanted to clarify, with the uses, the dimensional requirements, does that mean that R3, the 45-foot height is now going to be applied to B1? Which is only at 30 right now.
Tom, do you want to clarify that?
Yeah, that
Do you
was
wanna-
just brought up in,
I know, I want
this is a good
clarification.
example of why this stuff is so difficult and why things get messed up so easily. And it might be one where we just want to revisit the lot area per dwelling unit. We might want to spend a little more time on this, because that's an unintended consequence of just jumping back to the R3.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a lot of concerns with increasing the height, because all of a sudden you're going to have historic homes or buildings that are going to have extra floors put on top of them. You also have this zoning in abutting a lot of residential neighborhoods. You're going to have shadows on houses when you start going up. It's an extremely big change, and I think before you do this, you should allow the neighborhoods to have some sort of a formal review process to also look at it more closely.
Thank you. Councilor Terrell.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the point that one of the earlier speakers brought up, when she was referring to the cart before the horse on this. If I understand, in a B1 right now, it is legal to put dwelling units in a B1 today. What is currently, what we're looking at tonight is the current in the table saying, no, you can't put dwelling units above first floor retail or business, basically. But if you were to put a building, we have a huge amount of those in our B1 zones, but in fact, that's kind of, at least in my view, that's kind of what a B1 was designed for, places where you have mixed-use properties, where you have a retail store or a restaurant or a takeout place on your first floor, and then you have apartments above that. I look out at one when I, look out of my bedroom window every day, right across the street in a B1. So that seems to be a pretty, and most of Derby Street, for instance, is filled with that. So I think in that sense, it's pretty clear that since you can build dwelling units by themselves in a B1 today, the mixed use seems like a fairly obvious thing. So in dealing with the dimensional requirements, whatever we do with this, it's not like we're getting out and suddenly allowing a new use. You can build dwelling units in B1 today.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question?
Councilor Sargent, sure.
Thank you, Madam President. If you're in a B1 zone, wouldn't the overriding factor on height be B1 zoned height? Just because you allow R3 density, you're not changing the land to R3 zone, and therefore you wouldn't have to allow R3 height. So if the B1 is 30 feet versus 45 feet, wouldn't the B1 zone rules override?
If I may, the way it's worded tonight in the proposal was to change it back to use the R3 regulations. So I think this one needs, just from the conversation we had, and it was a good conversation, that this needs a little more work, so.
Okay.
I think we need to keep it
open?
to keep it in committee or continue it, yeah.
Which is good, because then we could change it to R3 density in a B1, but B1 rules on height, setbacks and all that would still override parking.
What I might also add is that we're asking to fix some of the recodification errors. If we go to change zoning, that's a little different process. We have to bring the zoning proposal forward in a different process and re-advertise it, I believe, if you're going to significantly change it.
So it's, if I may?
Yes.
The process would be the same in terms of coming for a joint public hearing. It would be introduced. I think, on this one specifically, the intention of this was mirroring R3 for the density, not for the height. So we need to modify that language. I think that we can do that in this process by continuing this public hearing and revise the language that would be trying to achieve the goal that I think we set out with.
Okay.
And we'll go backwards and look at the previous document and see if we can make a justification for that case.
Okay. And then I think Councilor Terrell, you had your hand up, and then Justin, you had your hand up, and then Polly. So you'll be number 3. Okay.
Thank you, Madam President. So my one question on this, could this be fixed in this particular case by taking, obviously there's a if we need to look at the entire dimensional requirement, that's one thing, but could we just simply insert after the word in section 3 there, just insert comma excluding height or accepting height? Would something like that fix
I'm not an
that,
expert
or-
on the process, I think Tom probably handles
No, but there are planners in the room that are, no.
I think we'll need to revisit it.
Yeah.
Because it's not just one dimensional. Again, the intent was the density regulation, the minimum lot area. So we'll need to look at this.
Okay, and then Justin?
My question.
Or actually, here, why don't you come up just so that we can get you on, get you recorded?
Justin Whittier, 10 River Street. I'm just going to say, I don't need to ask my question now.
Oh, okay, great. So, Holly Wilbert.
Holly Wilbert, 7 Cedar Street. So, once again, a question about process. If one were to continue this hearing, I question whether this meets the Sunshine Ordinance, where the average citizen would understand what has happened by just publishing the exact same agenda. I don't think that it meets the Sunshine Ordinance. The other issue that I have is that in order for the average citizen to understand this decision, you had to come down to the city clerk's office and get the zoning map, because the zoning map that's on the city website is from 2012, so it's 6 years old. It hasn't been updated. It needs to be updated so that somebody can understand where this applies, where it's been modified. I think we need to do a little more work than just continue this. And the other question I have in terms of this whole process is, if you close the public hearing tonight, does that close the public hearing at the planning board side? Because if it does, then I think the people need to understand that, because was not clear in the vote that was just taken in terms of closing the public hearing. You might not understand if it's closing the public hearing on the planning board side, that was what was just happening.
Okay, so what ideally I'd like to do, and if counselors agree with me, that I'd like to schedule this and figure this out, to schedule it for a date certain to continue the hearing. In order to comply with the Sunshine Ordinance, that it has to be at least 48 hours out. We have a meeting on Thursday night, so I'm looking at probably next week or the following week sometime, as soon as possible, to get this resolved. And so that we can keep it open and continue to receive public comment, and then Tom and Tom can work on everything that they need to do. Did that answer everything?
Well, I don't think by continuing it, if you don't modify the agenda item so that people understand clearly what's being considered, you haven't met the Sunshine Ordinance, where the average citizen has to understand what the issue is that's being discussed.
Councilor McCarthy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If Tom and Tom come back to us and the matter can't be continued because it has to be re-advertised, because in their opinion, because when they go back and look at the way it was written previously, if it has to be modified, then of course, then we, as they just stated, it goes back to, we have to re-advertise and start back at square one on this particular item. So that would meet all the requirements of the Sunshine Laws. If it fits into, if they go back and, because they don't have every document in front of them, if they go back and find out that this is the way it was prior, and if that's what the intent was prior, then they can. But if they can't, then I agree that it has to be re-advertised and it has to start back at square one.
Okay, so.
But then again, that would be a question for the city solicitor who would interpret that.
And we can also, we'll ask her, I can email her after this and get clarification on this as well. Councilor Sargent, you had your hand up, and then Tim, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam President. I know I agree with what's been said, that there's a lot before us tonight. It seems like a large rezoning when you add everything together. And last time we did something like this with the recodification, it took almost about 10 years of going through the meetings with Mark Bobrowski, and we finally got to the point in 2009. And this alone could be, we could have by itself and have a little working group, and then iron things out with a certain amount of people, and then bring it back before the council. It seems like a lot to have before us, to have a meeting and then bring it back before the council for a vote. the fences is one thing, but also the dimensional requirements or the table of uses is something that could be by itself before us, and somehow I'd like to see it come before the council, have a working group, bring it back, then go before the planning board and get some, like we said about some other issues, some transparent, open, honest, input from the people. So that's how we did it before, and I'd love to see us go forward that way again, not try to rush this. I mean, it's as simple as this R3 dimensional requirements, that allows R3 height. If it said R3 density requirements, that would just allow density, but that's the kind of input we're gonna get from people if we have a good group of people and get their input, so, thank you.
Thank you. Tim, you had your hand up?
Thanks very much. Yes, Tim Jenkins, 18 Broad Street. I have the same concern about the map and the updating of that map, which is 2012. There's nothing, I believe, in our ordinance or even at the state level. There is a requirement for a map, but it doesn't specifically say when it's updated. And I just think if we're going to reconsider this, that I think we're permitted to define when that would be updated, perhaps within 90 days of an actual zoning update, because it's really hard to track. There have been updates, and it does mean you not only have to come in and look at the map, but you really have to look at the actual zoning ordinance. You have to be aware of it. Anybody coming here to buy property isn't necessarily going to see what the real status is, and if you haven't read the zoning, you're not necessarily going to know that you need to go in and check it. And we have GIS, and it can be updated pretty quickly, I think, so that would be beneficial to everyone. The other one that bothers me, I hope I'm not out of order here, but if you want to get a curb cut, you have to, as a variance or whatnot, all of this is, the public has to be notified, abutters and abutters to abutters, and this is not required when there's zoning changes. And I'm not sure about the state law. I tried to understand it and tried to understand our own audience. It's not in ours, but I would love to see that if we're permitted to, so that way the public does know when there's something significant occurring as far as a zoning update. I think the property owners, the whole idea of zoning is to treat everybody equitably. And I could read ad nauseum on the rules, but I think that's not necessary. I think it's just the idea of trying to inform the public better. That's what my goal would be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so then.
Can I just follow up?
Come on up.
So my other question is that in the R3 dimensions, how do you have 3.5 stories? I mean, we just had the Burr Building built on the corner of Lafayette and West, and we had all kinds of discussions about the heights and what was actually functionally available to builders. And now here we're using a dimension that says you can have 3.5 stories. So I'm not sure what you get, maybe a child's playroom on the top, but is that appropriate if it's not realistic? Why are we using that dimension?
Right, I think Tom Cynthia can answer that. Can you answer that? I'm just putting you on the spot. No pressure, but answer it now.
Stories and half stories in the zoning book.
I'm sorry?
There are definitions of half stories and full stories in the zoning book. I didn't write it, I just enforce it.
Okay.
I mean, I believe in the old days, it was an attempt to capture some of the construction in Salem. There were some knee walls and attics that constitute a half story, and there's a lot of those around. And I think was probably an attempt to capture that years ago. Nowadays, you don't really see half stories very often.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Devil.
Thank you, Madam President. I like the good at-large councilor's comments here on this whole matter. I am a little confused to hear that this is not, our planner says that this is not Scribner's errors, but then at the same time later we hear that it's not a zoning change. So I'm wondering, what is this? In my mind's eye, this is a zoning, the second half of this is a zoning change. And I think we need to treat it that way. I like the idea of having, as the good at-large counselor mentioned, having a group of maybe a couple counselors, a couple of planning board members get together with our planner and our excellent building inspector and hammer this out exactly what it is before it comes back to us. Come back with a specific recommendation of X, Y, and Z. call it a zoning change, because that's what it is, and then we go forward with it more intelligently. We advertise it the right way as to what it is. So I'd like to move that the public hearing be kept open until an ad hoc committee is set up to review this and make specific changes back to this joint committee.
Okay, so we have until noon tomorrow to get it in, to request the ad hoc committee in order to get on our next agenda.
Second that
Okay, but-
by, if we vote, oh, I'm sorry, can I have permission?
Okay.
And I didn't mean to butt in. If we vote for that tonight, then it would go on the agenda just by virtue of voting for that. We could vote
No.
to put it on the agenda.
No, we would have to bring it in as an agenda item. But we also, Councilor McCarthy.
Madam Chair, it seems like there's two separate issues. One is the continuation of the public hearing, and two, the creation. They're two separate things, so
Yes.
you can keep it open, and then someone can bring in an order, submit an order by noon tomorrow to form an ad hoc committee to look at specifically what the desire is to look at. They should be separate, and then if the ad hoc committee comes back with a recommendation that they want to make a zoning change, then it goes through this whole process again. But that also it makes it a difficult situation, because you can't not keep a public hearing open unless you have a date.
Right. We need a date certain.
Date certain. And that would mean that this body and the planning board all have to agree on a date. So I would suggest that we keep it open.
Okay.
And then at the end, if there's any more that need to go to a date certain, then we figure out what the date is. I don't know what the potential is here.
Okay.
But I would, unless...
That sounds organized.
Yeah. But in that case, then I would move that the public hearing stay open.
Okay, so Councilor McCarthy moves that the public hearing stay open. All those in favor? All those opposed? Matter carries. And then where are we going next?
Might I suggest?
Oh, yes.
I suggest that we make a date, and if we didn't...
We're gonna, so it's, as Councilor, but as Councilor McCarthy suggested, that once we go through all the other items, so I tried to schedule this at a time where I knew that hopefully we can, if we need to, we'll meet again next week and hammer this and continue whatever needs to be continued. So at the end of the meeting tonight, if whatever's outstanding that we want to keep open, we'll schedule the date then so we can get all the dates in one uniform way.
No, it sounds very good, and if something, one or two of the issues aren't finished by that time, we can have the meeting for the ones that are, and then continue to a date certain, the rest of them. I get you, thank you.
Bingo. Okay, so, folks, where do we want to go next?
Section 10 definitions.
Section 10-0. I don't think anybody has any objection to that.
Amending zoning section 10.0 definitions relative to dwelling unit, rooming, boarding, and lodging house, general service establishment, assisted living residence, site plan review, and zoning board of appeals.
So, Tom and Tom.
Okay, Madam President, so here, the first three items are correcting or amending definitions that were existing. So the first being dwelling unit, the second, rooming, boarding, and lodging house, because the changes were, it was easier just to delete it and insert the new paragraph for clarity. And then the third being amending the general service establishment by adding just the word and deleting and the like from that. The next three items are adding new definitions that also conform to the state definitions. So the first being assisted living residences, the second being site plan review, and the third being zoning board of appeals.
Okay, so did anybody have any questions for Tom or Tom on this from the council? Anyone from the planning board? Noah?
Yeah, under section 1, letter A, where the sentence where it says no more than 3 people not within the second degree of kindred shall live, is that directly out of the Mass General laws, or is that added in some other way? I guess my confusion is, it says as defined by the laws, and then there's a second sentence after that. Is that indicating that that's not within the law and that's extra, or is that covered within those two sets of regulations?
If I could, ma'am.
Yes.
The definition of a rooming house in Massachusetts, I can't cite the exact Mass General Law, but I can get it for you, defines it as 4 or more unrelated individuals. And that's why we've used that no more than 3 unrelated before you trigger the fact that you're in a rooming house.
So does that
I'd
answer
be
your
happy
question?
to provide that Mass General Law.
Okay. Does that answer it? Thank you. Any other members of the planning board? Questions? Okay, any members of the public in favor?
We can't hear you.
Sorry, are you in favor? If you want to speak in favor. Anybody here to speak in opposition? Polly?
So Polly Wilbert, 7 Cedar Street. Just a point of information. I believe there are 2 typos here, so talk about Scrivener error. Under B, rooming, boarding, or lodging house, a house where lodgings are let, not were, I believe.
Good catch.
And under D, in the last line, are not designed, past tense, for people who need serious medical care.
Which Councilor O'Keefe on meeting?
Thank you. Okay,
Anyone else?
what are we doing? Does anybody else have any comments, questions?
I would just like that.
Counselor Sargent?
Just the definition of rooming, boarding, or lodging house, we're gonna delete it and replace it with this. Does anybody have in writing before us what it says now, so we can see the before and after? I mean, without pulling out the zoning book, I didn't.
Madam Chair? While Tom's looking it up,
I'm sorry, Counselor McCarthy.
I guess my question would be, is it consistent with Mass General Law?
Yes.
The new definition within the Mass General Law?
We have a lodging house in here.
Yes, it is.
We have bed and breakfast.
It's in there.
Rooming, boarding, or lodging house. Would you like the definition read? It's a short one.
Yes.
It's short,
Just
yes.
so we can see it.
Rooming, boarding, or lodging house, a dwelling or part thereof, in which lodging is provided by the owner or a separate or operator to at least 3 or not more than 6 roomers or boarders.
Wide open.
Okay, Counselor McCarthy?
Yeah, just
Oh,
because.
wait, hang on, I just called on Counselor McCarthy and then I'll call on you.
Yeah, just a
No,
question.
no,
Oh,
I
sorry,
called
go
on
ahead.
Counselor
Take it away.
McCarthy first and then I'll get you.
Thank you.
Counselor McCarthy?
So, Tom, the definitions that we just presented in front of us are consistent with what's now in Mass General Law?
Yes.
Regards to
Yes.
rooming house, boarding house, lodging?
Right.
Thank you.
The zoning, there could be other triggers for building code requirements, such as the rooming house. But as far as zoning goes, yes, it's in compliance.
Thank you.
Counselor Sargent?
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, just with what we're proposing now is 4 or more. But the current is not more than 6. So is it possible we could end up with, right now, it's limited to 6. Could we end up with 7, 8, 9, 10 without putting a top limit on that, as there is now?
If I may, it's a special permit use now, so
Right.
anyone that proposed to do a residence or a rooming house would be before the zoning board for a special permit.
If we're gonna go by state law and state, exact state wording, I understand. But if it was 3 and not more than 6 without the benefit of a special permit, because it just seems funny to leave it open-ended like that, that's all.
if I may, the rooming or boarding house is a special permit use now, currently.
Right. But right now, we have a limit on the total amount, not more than 6.
Right.
What we're proposing to put in doesn't have a limit on it doesn't say not more than any amount. It leaves it open-ended. So I just didn't know if that could be an issue.
I don't have an answer for that.
Thank you. I sorry to be a pain, I just didn't.
Okay, so any other questions from counselors? Seeing none? Any planning board members? Okay, any members speaking in favor?
I'm not in favor.
Okay, I guess anyone speaking opposed?
My name is Mary Madore, and I can speak from personal experience. There was a house on my street that was a lodging
And did you give us your
house.
address? I'm sorry, Mary.
Excuse me?
Did you give us your address?
31 Forester.
Thank you.
And the fellow that purchased it wanted to have 16 people in the house. I don't want to sound cold, okay? These were people that had issues. But he would get $114 per day per person from the state. And we had multiple issues in the neighborhood. We had guys peeing off the porch, fires, people running back in to get their dope. So I agree with Arthur Sargent. There has to be a limit on the number of people that can be allowed in these rooming houses or lodging houses. It took us years in the neighborhood to straighten that out. And thanks to Bobby St. Pierre, we were able to. So I urge you to put a restriction on it. Thank you.
And Polly?
Holly Wilbert, 7 Cedar Street. So a question about D, and I know we have a physician here and at least one nurse here. Just in terms of the legality of this language, it's talking about medication assistance, which I can understand can only be provided by a medical professional, and yet at the bottom it says that do not provide medical or nursing services. So I believe that that's in conflict. I think that a nurse has to provide medication at a minimum, and that you might want to clarify this language to protect that legality.
Does anyone else in the public?
I just wanna-
Or how about Councilor
Yeah,
Sargent?
there may be something with rooming houses that refers to the number of bedrooms. If there's 4 bedrooms in a house, then it would be limited to 4. But I would suggest that we continue this also and have the same zoning review committee, review this also with citizen input. Please.
Is that a motion on the floor?
Yes, that's the motion.
It's a motion to keep the public hearing open?
Yes, motion to keep the public hearing on this and add this to the ad hoc committee that we're going to form.
I'd like to
Okay.
second that, Madam President, but
Okay.
I have a question before we take a vote.
Yes.
If we just include it as part of this discussion.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, to our city planner, I guess, or to our building inspector, who wrote this paragraph on the rooming, boarding, and lodging houses, and why was the limit removed?
This was mirroring the state definition. So,
The state definition does not have a limit.
that's my understanding.
Would you have a recommendation that we should have a limit? Or that we?
So our goal here was, again, just trying to be consistent with the state definitions here. I don't know, Tom, if you ran into issues with the definition that you can speak to more about it, but that's the context, the background for it. Perhaps there was something missed, and we can go back and check that.
All I can add to this conversation is I've worked for the city for 20 years in the building department, and I've yet to see a new rooming house approved. These are the boarding and lodging houses are typically the B&Bs, and those come before and get a special permit, and they're limited by the number of parking spaces, and the neighborhoods certainly have input on it. So we haven't had that case where we've had people trying to create new rooming houses, or if they have, they've been resoundingly turned away, because we have a number of them now that we try to manage. So we could certainly revisit that and see if we want to put a cap on the number.
Thank you, Madam President. I have my answer, and I second the motion from the Good at Large Council.
Okay, and Councilor Terrio?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. So I wonder, if we want to continue this as well, that's fine. My question is, are we making this, looking at the basic, we're looking at the basic definitions here. We're not looking at what the regulations are concerning boarding houses, rooming houses, and all the like. So we're not saying, we're not talking about what the permit process is, if any, whether there's a special permit, what the maximum number are, because that's not part of your basic definition. The definition here is just up to 3 people in a dwelling. If you have 4 or more, then you're rooming or boarding a lodging house at that point. And so anything more than that, you fall under that regulation, and you would have to get appropriate permitting and all the like to it. So, I mean, you know, if the body wants to continue this, that's fine. This seems, at least on its surface, in terms of the basic definition, to be fairly simple. I think one of the issues here might be that we're not looking at it in the context of what those regulations are that we have in place, and we're just looking at what the definition is here. So, you know, it's like we're not looking at the big picture, because that's not language we have to edit necessarily.
Thank you. Okay, so there is a motion on the floor to keep the public hearing open, and when we schedule the previous public hearing, we will also schedule this one, if that is the will of the body. So all those in favor of keeping this public hearing open? All those opposed? Matter carries. Okay, where are we going next?
Let me go to the NRCC.
Okay.
Amending zoning section 8.4.9, parking requirements, subparagraph 4A of the NRCC zoning district to require 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit.
Okay, Madam Chair. So this is very straightforward. It's looking to change the requirement from 2 spaces per unit to 1.5 spaces per unit. Currently, the NRCC parking requirement is the highest in the city. Nowhere else is it. All the other residential zones are 1.5 spaces. In the B5 central business, it goes to 1 space per unit for rehabilitation of buildings for residential uses. So the goal here was to bring this in conformance with the other residential zones or mixed-use districts that we have, not technically mixed use, but districts that have mixtures of uses. And given the proximity of the North River Canal Corridor to a pedestrian-oriented environment, to transit and goods and services, it just seemed to be the right thing to do. In addition, by having a higher parking requirement than is necessary, it increased impervious surface. It can also increase costs of development because more spaces are being paved than are needed. We had just a informal review of the parking utilization at a couple, the 28 Goodhue, the North River Apartments development, as well as the Liberty at Bell, the yellow apartment development, and their parking utilization was much less than, let me grab my notes here because I don't have it committed to memory, less than 1.5. So North River Apartments was at 1.29 spaces, and the Bell was at 0.95 vehicles per unit utilization.
Thank you, and I know that we have a number of new projects in Ward 6 that are within the NRCC that are coming online, that are in the approval process or have already been approved. And I know that for me, I think And when I look around at the ward, and I think that this makes a lot of sense, because I'd much rather have more green space than have impervious surfaces, that this is what we end up seeing is more parking spaces. I look at the parking lot at 28 Goodhue, and instead of them, and I was talking about this, I think, online, that instead of them having a patio, having a garden space, they have parking lot that they can't use, or that nobody else can use. It's only for the residents, but they're not using it. And so this is the same thing that you see at Liberty, at the Bell Apartments that are also Ward 6, that you have empty parking lots that aren't being used, that, again, they could have had more. They have a small patio, small pool area, but like, they could have had more. They could have had more outdoor spaces, but because of this, that wasn't possible. So, so I think that this would be the right thing to do. I think, I think that when this was created, that the idea was, let's get people off of the street, let's get them, parking in parking lots. But the reality is that people have changed in their buying, in where they're living, and they're not buying cars the way that they used to then. And honestly, I kind of think that the traffic problem that we have here has kind of helped that people don't want to get in their cars anymore, because it's a schlep. I mean, when I used to take the train, I used to walk more often than not, because it was much easier to deal with walking than to have to deal with trying to find parking. And when I was doing this, it was before the garage. So I think that it is something that does make sense, but I will also open it up to other counselors who would like to comment, if there are any. Councilor Madore.
Thank you, Madam President. To maybe Tom, or, well, both Toms.
Can't go wrong.
Just throw out Tom.
My question is that if we vote for a change to reduce the requirement, would it grandfather the current requirements on existing developments, the two that you mentioned specifically? And the other question is, what happens to the current proposals in the pipeline if we reduce this requirement?
So the projects that, the two that I referenced are built, and so the parking exists. If they wanted to modify, eliminate parking and increase green space, then they need to go through a process for that. The projects that have been permitted have been, they have, so the Gateway Center, their parking requirement was met through a shared parking between the commercial, the community life center, and the residential development. The Flintan had a reduction in their parking attributed to the commercial spaces. And that one's under construction now. For ones that haven't started construction, that have been permitted, if they wanted to make a modification, they would need to come in and file an amendment for their plans, if they were looking to reduce that and then to increase their open space.
So would the reduction, if, say, the Bell Apartments, as a result of this reduction, they would like to convert some of the impervious surfaces to another use, would open space be the only option, or they could propose something else?
How would you look at that?
First, they'd have to come to the board and get relief from the aforementioned. They were designed with 2 spaces. They'd have to get relief from that. And there really aren't any other uses other than an open space or a green space that would be permitted. The parking space was supposed to be accessory to the main use of the building. So for instance, you couldn't then rent those lots out to commuters or something like that.
Yeah, my concern is that this would be considered a windfall for some of these existing developments, that they would free up more land area for them to consider additional development. So I was very surprised to hear that the Bell Apartments, the usage is under 1 space per unit. So that's a huge reduction from their current parking lot. And then final question is, would this change delay any of the projects that are currently being reviewed? For example, would a developer wait for us to make a decision before moving forward with some of the projects?
So I mean, there's the project I know that is going through the permitting process on Franklin Street, the junkyard. You know, their project is, they were intending to seek relief from the ZBA on the number of parking spaces. So, you know, this would, I think they would not need to go to the ZBA for relief on that aspect anymore. So I don't know that it would delay things. They still need to go to the, my understanding that they will need to go to the ZBA for different relief. So I don't see this as delaying this decision, changing the permitting path for them.
Thank you.
Are you done? Okay, so Councilor McCarthy, then Councilor Sargent.
I'll ask the question no one's gonna ask, or no one has asked it yet, or is afraid to ask it, so I don't know. But I guess by reducing the parking requirement, I guess the question would be, would that allow anybody to put up another build if they have left spaces required for their lot, whatever it is, with that, and then if they have less spaces, if they could, then they add a floor, or could they add another building and still maintain the same amount of parking spaces, but then at some point try to figure out how they can lose some parking spaces and add another structure? Or I guess then would that go to lot coverage, and are they already maxed out at coverage, and then therefore that's not an issue? So by changing the parking requirement, are we just looking at, by lessening the parking requirement, is it just gonna be a result of increased green space or whatever other space the developer wants to put on it, except for additional units? It's the question that everyone wants to ask, but no one wanted to ask it, so I'll ask it.
Well, to answer the council asked previously the same question, sort of, the density requirements are still there. They don't go away under this. It just simply reduces the parking requirement. Does that free up a little space? Could they jostle things around potentially for a couple more units? Maybe, but they still have to meet the 1.5, and they still have to meet all the density setbacks and everything else. So yes, you could jostle change the shape of it just a little bit and maybe add a few units, but I don't think substantial number of them.
I think more likely, if I may, I think more likely it would result in some more additional open space at the sites, but.
Any other councilors? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Sargent. I'm
Thank
sorry,
you,
I
Madam
misforgot you.
President. I think the North River Canal Corridor, committee, part of their thinking was that going by the number of bedrooms. So there were two and 3 bedroom units, so they weren't going to make 3 per unit, but they were going to have a little bit more and have 2, because a lot of times with 2 bedrooms you get 2 cars, and there may be times when there aren't that many cars, but if you get a change and there are, then you're going out into the street, and especially in the wintertime, it's going to make things difficult. So isn't it better to have a few extra for growth if that happens, and also for having company over? We don't have that many visitor spaces, and if somebody would have an event at their house, with a birthday, christening, whatever, there's plenty of open spaces. So there may be times when they're all taken. And also, part of the reason that there's so much hot top taken up and so much less greenery is that we're given bonuses. We're given more units than are allowed by right in the North River Canal Corridor to every development built or proposed so far. So in some way, if we gave a little bit extra, 1.2 instead of 1.5 or 2, 2 to 1 for the amount of units allowed, we'd have more open space, because we just do the math. Instead of 200 spaces for 100 units, we'd have 100 spaces for 50 units. So we're kind of giving it to ourselves by allowing more density. We're creating more parking spaces and less green space. So we have to think of that also. And so if we go forward with 1.5, the ones that are already built have enough space because there's 2 spaces per unit. If we made some of that greenery, we can go back to having them be parking spaces. But if we go to 1.5 and there's no extra space to go to 2 because we've used all the land, then we're gonna be in a difficult position, especially if we go forward down by the old Ferris junkyard, because we're right into the neighborhood. All that parking, if there's overflow parking, it's gonna go into the neighborhood. Down along Grove Street, it's not so bad, but we have to look at the whole North River Canal corridor and the effect on parking in the neighborhood. I mean, people on Franklin Street have to park at Bates School sometimes during the winter months, so they need extra parking. They certainly can't deal with cars coming into the neighborhood in the wintertime. They're already more than full, especially in the winter months, so I just wish we consider all of that. Thank you.
Councilor Terrell.
Thank you, Madam President. So, looking at, the narrative that we got with this, with the timetable. So the NRCC was set up by the committee that came up with it and they submitted it to the City Council in June 2004. And at the time when it was done in draft, it had 1 space per unit as the requirement. And that's, given the transit dependence of the NRCC, I understand that. And then it was updated in committee to be 1.5 spaces per unit, and then the planning board also recommended that, and then when City Council did first passage, this didn't come out of the planning board or the NRCC committee, the City Council changed it in 2004 to 2 spaces at first passage. So this is something that got inserted at the very end of the process to take it away from our standard of 1.5 spaces that we have in most of the city. So I don't see that as, I don't see us going down to a 1 space requirement, even though that's what the NRCC draft originally called for. If there is a neighborhood in Salem that could more easily work for, this would probably be it. Because all the developments within the NRCC, the Gateway Center is the one that's really the farthest away from transit in the entire NRCC, and it's certainly, that can handle it pretty easily. So I think based on this, that 1.5 is a perfectly reasonable number to go with, because, and this is something that I've mentioned in discussions with people about, is that I do see a trend, especially in that neighborhood, towards more single-car families, where one person is a train commuter and one person is staying local, and there's usually, in those cases, there's 1 car. So, just in my own really, really limited experience, when we first moved to Salem, we were a single-car family also. We owned 1 car. I drove to a job in Woburn, and my wife took the train to Boston. We did that for a number of years, and during that time, we were living in the downtown, and I think that's a fairly typical example. If you need more space, if you need more cars, some people will need more in a development like this, but a lot of them won't, so that's where that 1.5 seems to work from. And if you need more space, if you need more parking, you generally move out into the neighborhoods, and in a lot of those cases, you have a driveway or a garage or whatever at that point. But I think this is fairly reasonable, and especially given that we don't have this high of a parking requirement anywhere else in Salem, but we're imposing it in the neighborhood, in the planning area that's closest to your train station. So this seems to make a lot of sense to me.
Any other councilors? Any planning board members? No? Noah?
Yeah, so I think I've spent a lot of time as a professional planner looking at zoning ordinances and parking requirements. And this, when I joined the planning board and, studied the ordinances we have here, this was the single biggest head scratcher to me of why we had it in the ordinance, of the entire ordinance. Typically, I think Councilor Terrell articulated it pretty well. In your most transit accessible densest development, you have the fewest number of spaces required per unit, and as development gets sort of more suburban in nature, you tend to see more cars per unit. 1.5, quite frankly, for industry standard, right near transit, is still fairly high. There's tons and tons and tons of data out there. You don't have to rely on personal experience about parking utilization in multifamily housing near transit, and virtually all of it are to reduce, speaks to reducing transit requirements, reducing parking requirements, not increasing them. So if anything, all the North River Canal parcels are walkable to transit, they're walkable to downtown. We should be requiring the fewest number of cars per unit in this zone than in the rest of the city. I think there's also there's a tendency to sort of worry about spillover into the neighborhood, but we have data that says what the utilization will be. We have data from existing developments, such as Goodview Street, that are within the zone. And then further, I've been on the board during the time period when a lot of these, we've done site plan review for a number of these North River Canal corridor developments, and virtually always there's been some sort of not so ideal site plan compromises that have had to happen because we have developers coming in and saying, we don't want to make this look like a Walmart parking lot surrounding our building, but we want to limit the amount of exposure we have to the zoning board in terms of asking for parking relief. So it creates a problem that, if we're setting forth a good policy in terms of the zoning regulations, that we're creating a problem that doesn't need to be there by requiring more parking than there is demand for. And, I certainly don't trust developers about everything, but developers will always overestimate the amount of parking they need, not underestimate it. I've never seen a situation professionally where a developer has wanted to do something, has wanted to put in not enough parking for their residents, because the marketability of the units is how they make their money. And they read the statistics, they read the data, and they know how many cars are going to be parking for them to be able to sell the units, either sell them as condos or continuously rent them out. So you don't have a lot of developers coming in and saying, we want to build in no parking, because they need that parking. Parking is an amenity that is required for them. If they have people with 3 cars coming in and they only have 1 parking space, they're not going to be able to lease those units. But what they're seeing is a trend that the people who are leasing those units do not have more than 1 vehicle. So if anybody's interested in this, there's so much data on this, just Google it. This is not something new. Cities are dealing with this all over the place. Okay.
Thank you. Any further members of council or the planning board? I'll open it up to the public. So, I'm sorry, Councilor Dibble.
Thank you, Madam President. Couple fast questions. This is clearly a zoning change, and my question is, was it advertised as such?
Yes, all the changes before you were advertised according to what they were. So the Scrivener's errors were separate from the other changes that were presented tonight. So just to be clear on that, the legal ads reflected what matters were purely Scrivener errors, and we talked about the swimming pool. We haven't talked about the B1. That changed. Everything else was not advertised as a Scrivener's error.
The NRCC has been around for almost 14 years now, and a sizable amount of development has taken place within that zone, predominantly all residential. I'm curious, a ballpark number in your estimate, how many units have been built, are in the permitting process, and are about to be, how many units are we talking about in total have been constructed in this small section of Salem, basically between North Street and Boston Street along the canal? A little bit more than that. You have Franklin Street added to it, I guess.
Yeah, Madam Chair, so there's been 44 units that have been constructed, and that is the 28 Goodhue project. That's the only thing that's actually been built. The Flintham project is under construction with, let's see, I don't have the unit counts with me, and I don't want to misstate them, but you know what they are?
I believe it's 66 or 48.
48.
48.
Okay.
Two.
The Gateway Center, is 117 units. That hasn't started construction. Riverview Place is 130 units. That's the old Salem Suite. That has not started construction. Salem Oil and Grease is in the area, but it's in a different zoning category. And so that was permitted as a PUD. So it's a little bit different, but that was permitted at 1.5 spaces per unit. the hood factory that's
9 South
29?
Mason.
Sorry?
9 South Mason.
Yeah,
Yes.
9 South, 29, 32?
Nine so
Well,
far.
including 6 existing.
All right, so those are the tallies. And then the Franklin Street project is, do you remember what that's coming in now? 40?
3.
48.
43?
Oh, 40, that's right, it went up to 48.
All right.
Proposed.
Yeah.
So we're talking something under 500 total units without really doing the math. I didn't take notes. Maybe it's 400, whatever the number is, I'm not sure. That's a sizable amount of growth in one area. And I'd really like to be sure that in reducing the number of required parking spaces, that we're not, we say it might be marginal, we should really know if we reduce it from 2 required spaces down, how many more units could they really develop and build for? We've hinted around it. Councilor Good Ward 1 councilor touched upon it the best way. He actually asked the question, but we never really got the answer, and none of us really know the answer. So I want to act cautiously on this. This is a lot of development happening in this area, and as a result of the parking change, it might be that much more.
No, I think that question was actually answered by the building inspector, who explained that they wouldn't be given really enough space to really build upon anything, and it may, if anything, allow more green space, however the developer chooses to use the open space. So I think that question was already clarified. Councilor Terrell?
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, well, in the discussion, there's dimensional requirements are still, and setback
Right.
requirements are still the same. So there's no change to that. And I'll speak for the moment for Mr. St. Pierre, just, he said there might be a little bit of jiggering of a unit or two in some of these developments if that are in the design phase because of that change, should it be made. But you're not likely to be looking at any substantive change to it, and it doesn't affect your buildings that have your places that are already in the construction process or have been built. So you're looking at potentially a handful of redevelopments yet to come, mainly on probably as time goes by on Mason Street, but you're still looking at 1.5 spaces per unit, which is the standard in most of the city.
Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Madam President. What is the consideration for visitor parking at these sites? Because the majority of places I've been in the city, it seems that around supper time, there is no visitor parking. They're all taken up, whether you go to Pope Street, Courageous Court, Lauren Towers. So to be on the safe side, as the good at-large councilor said, wouldn't it be better to allow for those two spots where you're keeping the development at a certain size and you allowing for the visitor parking? That usually is tough for people to park at.
So
Madam Chair, through you, I think that I think the planning board member Noah spoke to this in terms of a developer wanting to build a project that's going to work, that's for the residents, as well as the guests. There's also, in the context of the North River Canal Corridor, it's like the rest of sort of the greater downtown area where people, if there's not a, people will visit people and park on the street. It's not meant to be, I think what the challenge that I think Noah referenced is where developers are trying to meet the parking requirements of 2 spaces and they're not able to optimize the development from a design, a functionality perspective, or as we've talked about, the open space piece of it as well. So there's only so much you can do on a piece of land, and you're trying to meet the various requirements that we've got there, and having it function for the people who are going to live there, as well as the community around it. I think the planning board, in their deliberations over projects, takes that into consideration, looking at how this development is going to function in the context of the neighborhood.
Is there a formula for visitor parking at each site that you use?
So it looks, I think we look at project by project what it's going to be. So for instance, I referenced the Gateway Center. That's you've got a mixed-use project that's going to have some commercial space and residential, and the site has also got the community life center, so there's shared parking there. Similarly, the Flintan project was looked at with some shared parking between the commercial space and the residential, understanding that it's unlikely that all the spaces are going to be utilized at the same time because of the typical flow of people coming and going from their residences and people coming and going from the businesses that are there, so that you can maximize the spaces that are there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I can't emphasize enough that 28 Goodhue is the furthest development in the NRCC from the downtown, from the T station, and they only use 1.3 spots. And look at Bell, that's right on top of the T station, right downtown, and they're using less than one. So, I mean, this is what we're seeing, and frankly, those apartments are not cheap at all. And so these are people that do have some means that they can make a decision about what cars they're going, if they're going to buy cars, and these are people that are choosing not to buy cars. So, any further questions from councilors? Any further questions from planning board? So let's, and hang on. So we're gonna open it up for anybody who is here speaking in favor of reducing the parking. Okay, then anybody opposed?
Not opposed, I want to speak in favor.
Oh, in favor? Okay, come on up, Mike.
I'll try to be brief and make this make
Okay.
sense. I want to applaud the planner's comments, previously spot on. As a developer and a real estate broker in town, right on. If you don't have the parking, you can't sell condo or rent rental units. Beyond that, I question, the B5 zone allows for off-site parking to use the municipal garage up to 1,000 feet away. If, just bear with me, if we're allowing people who live downtown to walk 1,000 feet from the garage to their residence every day, why is it not reasonable to think that places in the NRCC that are 1,000 feet or less from the train station would not be allowed to have less than 2 cars? It just seems like a ridiculous, as you mentioned, less than 2 cars used at the Bell, and the farthest one away still doesn't use its requisite parking, even if it was at 1.5. So basically all we're doing is adding pavement and eliminating green space, and yeah, to the point that's been made, maybe the developers will add additional units on that, but if there's a green space requirement and if there's setbacks and other zoning provisions in place and planning board review and design review, I think that's pretty well covered. That's all.
Thank you. Okay, so then going around the room, opposed, Polly and then Tim.
Polly Wilbert, 7 Cedar Street. So I would just be cautious about how you do this, in the sense that there are a fair number of unknowns here. In part, the quantity of commercial space in any of these future developments. Even at Gateway, if you have a successful restaurant at night and the 117 residents come home with whatever cars they have, and you have an event at the senior center in the evening, you very conceivably would max out your parking and you've got nowhere else to go, because basically the on-street parking is already committed. There's not on-street parking on Bridge, there's only on-street parking on Boston. And so most of those neighborhoods surrounding the NRCC have very little bandwidth to absorb any additional parkers. They're historic. Even, we've cleared Flint Street into a pod parking lot off. There's not any bandwidth. So if you end up with just even one successful development with a significant commercial operation, that's at night, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. And remember, this is New England. The snow does not go away. Inevitably, you hear developers say they will take the snow off-site, and they do not do it. It is piled higher and wider. So let's look at the realities of what really does happen. The snow doesn't go away. Very often, there's not enough space for it to be stored on site. And if you have success with a commercial operation, you have no bandwidth. And it will be a very difficult situation that most often will be dealt with by the ward counselors. So I just caution you to think about this very carefully, because you don't have any safety valves, and you need the snow emergency parking. You need to have those cars not go somewhere else in the winter. Thank you.
Tim?
Thank you. Tim Jenkins, 18 Broad Street. To Noah's point, if I could through you, maybe I could ask a question, because when I first looked at this ordinance, I didn't understand it either. It kind of stood out at me, so I asked others, and I did get a very similar answer about the impact on the neighborhoods. Some of these are really tight old neighborhoods, so to some degree, maybe that's why the city council decided to increase it from the 1.5. But so it's probably worth another discussion right now, because there have been a number of projects permitted already, some, not a whole lot built, but, and that remains to be seen why that is. But my sense is that it makes more sense to try to focus on, if we want more green space rather than asphalt, what incentive, or how do you create a zoning ordinance that encourages that? And one of the other problems that I've seen is that I don't believe one project has been built at below the permitted density. And if you are going to build way above the permitted density and you don't have enough parking spaces, you run into a problem. And I really question why it's being done consistently above the permitted density. And then we have the other observation, which is the commercial. I haven't seen the commercial built really yet, but if it were built as you know, hypothetically built, then you could run into the problem. And I'd say particularly at Gateway. That's conceivable. And that's another neighborhood where, as pointed out, you cannot park on Bridge Street around there. What little parking there is already, let's say on Flint, is gone. There's really nowhere else to go. There's certainly not enough on Boston Street. So in an ideal world, you need to have you need to have numbers that people can look at, but giving the discretion or encouraging whether it's the planning board to look at a project case by case and try to figure out, is this one where we're going to have a big impact on a neighborhood, either through traffic. There are traffic issues over on Ferris. You can't make certain turns out of one road. You're forced to go through neighborhoods. People are pretty up in arms about that, as far as I know. I've heard plenty of them speak to me. So, at any rate, I'd love to see how to encourage more green space. And the only other observation I'd make is over in Europe. I don't see it here. Maybe it's the snow. I don't know. But there are a lot of parking lots that are being converted to green parking lots. Where there's, if it's not totally green, they have concrete. It's usually a lattice, and green grass grows through it. Again, in the summer, you have to mow it. But in the winter, you still have to plow. I believe it can be done. I've seen them in Sweden, so I know it can be done. But I don't see that here. So maybe encouraging a developer, possibly even with a density bonus or something like that, if they would not have a big sea of asphalt there. So again, there are techniques I know, and I know a lot of, I guess I should add one more thing. I've seen cities where they actually maximize the amount of parking that you can build on a site in order to avoid this business of a sea of parking. I'm not proposing it here at all, but I know that different zoning strategies do employ that. But I think what I would recommend finally here is that you just review what's happened in the NRCC, figure out what's working, why are we getting so much higher density all the time, what that impact is on the parking, and then change the regs to meet the what's really happening there and what you want to happen. Thanks.
Thank you. Noah, and then Carol.
Yeah, so just in a quick response, I think, I think the easiest way to mess with zoning to encourage more green spaces to not make people build parking spaces that nobody wants. I mean, these are we're building extra parking spaces that the data says are not being used. And I think just a really quick clarification as to this idea of the multi-use sites where there are, commercial uses in the senior center and things like that mixed in. This is specifically for residential dwelling units. So this is only addressing the residential dwelling unit requirement. There are other requirements for commercial, and those are all taken into consideration. So on sites that are more complex in terms of the use mix, like the senior center site, there was a very long conversation about how those different uses affected parking sharing at different times of the night. And I've been sitting on the board for multiple site plan reviews within this zone where we have had sites that aren't optimized for design because the developer has sort of thrown up their hands and said, look, I can't ask for too much relief. I don't need the parking spaces, but we have to build parking spaces instead of green space. And they've used that, and it's gotten through the board to justify the fact that they don't have a good site plan in terms of pedestrian infrastructure, in terms of green space on the plan, because our zoning was forcing them to build parking spaces that they didn't want and their tenants didn't want.
Thank you. Carol?
Yeah, I'm going to ditto what Noah just said. And the other thing I'm going to suggest is that if these projects, and I've been on the board long enough now so that I've reviewed a number in the RCC, and every single one of them, we've said this could be a much better design if we didn't have to do 2 parking spaces. We've encouraged people to go to the Board of Appeals for parking relief because 2 is too many. The other thing I would suggest, if all of these projects are within 1,000 feet of the MBTA, if there's a night when everything is going on in town, there's a parking lot that's not being used at night. If they can walk during the day, they can walk during the evening as well.
Thank you. Ann?
Thank you. Ann Sterling, 29 Orchard Street in Northfields. I just wanted to speak to Councilor Dibble's questions regarding number of developments that are coming along online in the NRCC area, and it's really quite a lot of units that have been happening in a very short amount of time. I feel like I'd like to keep the 2 parking space requirement per unit. And I think that also we're talking about the Ferris Junkyard coming online, that development coming online in Northfields. But also there's about 4, I'm going to say at a minimum 4 big parcels that are right next to Ferris that are for sale, and I know people will be buying those and putting in projects. So that's going to really, really affect the density right on that funny little corner on Franklin Street. But I'd also like to call to your attention the fact that Furlong Park is right next to the Ferris Junkyard that will be coming online. And the fact that on summer evenings, I'm going to call it from April through September, October, I don't know when the Little League finishes, but you have all kinds of parents pouring in from every place in the city with their vans, their suburban vans. They got the 2 kids, they got the kids in the vans, the parents park along the sides of the street and they watch the game from the vans. So that whole parking situation on Franklin Street becomes crazy, and a lot of kids start darting back and forth across the street, so it makes me very nervous. I would like to keep the density down on Franklin Street as far as possible, and if the requirement for 2 parking will do that, then I'm in favor of it, because personally, I really don't know that many families that don't have 2 cars. I don't know how many people in this room have a household that has 1 car. I'd be curious, but I would like to keep the 2-car parking. Thank you.
Thank you. And then continuing to, not yet we're coming around to you. Justin?
Justin Whittier, 10 River Street. I'm sympathetic to this in some ways, because who wouldn't like to see less asphalt and more green space? But, you know, we're talking about what usage is now, and by changing the zoning and then having development respond to that, you're going to have for the long term, you know, a situation with cars that, you know, the usage could change. The T is getting more and more crowded, and whether or not the state is going to, you know, make the necessary upgrades. I know a lot of people are turned off actually from using the commuter rail. I know people who live in the neighborhood across the river who won't use it to commute because it's just too crowded, which is a shame. But so I hope that you're looking forward, and, you know, not just what exists right now, because, you know, according to what you're saying, the usage, you know, we could have fewer parking spaces, but that could change. And the NRCC, you know, the vision for that was that you're going to have large developments, cheek by jowl, with neighborhoods that are already crammed with cars. I mean, there isn't space on those streets for more cars. So the fear was that you would have overflow. And so, to my mind, if you know, have fewer spaces required, you're just going to see more units put in there. I mean, the developers go for as many units as they can get. So I'm not convinced that you're going to see, you know, you're going to see the response that you want. And maybe if you reduce it to 1.5, you're getting a lot closer to the actual usage. Who's to say that there isn't going to be a fluctuation so that you then are going to have too many cars? And the one other thing I'd say is that people who commute often have cars anyway. They might commute during the week on the train because it's convenient, but they've got their cars for everything else, going to the grocery store, going anywhere else. So I hope you'll consider those things.
Thank you. Then continuing, Tyler.
Tyler Terry, 22 School Street. Okay, so it looks like there's 3 reasons that Tom gave in his letter. The first one is he went over the history. It went from 1 to 1.5 to 2, but then never like says, oh, it went from 1.5 to 2 for this reason, and it's wrong because blah. I'd hope that he would have gone through that and said, oh no, this isn't like a valid reason, but he doesn't really outline that in his letter. He just says the history. While I was waiting to come in this meeting, I was talking to someone in front of City Hall that was waiting to get picked up that lives at Bell, and she said that she has her dedicated space and access to a visitor space, and she parks her personal car in the visitor space because the parking usage, like, you can't always tell whether or not it's going to be available or not, and if you have guests coming over, it's easier for them to park into your dedicated space than to go find a visitor space. I myself have been trained to also not parking my driveway, but if there's a space available on Buffum, I'll park there so that if I have a visitor come over, they can park in my driveway. If I know I have a visitor coming over, I'll park further down Buffum. I know I'm partly the problem for the parking issues in Salem, but that's just because it's not always clear that there's going to be a space. Let's see. And then I don't understand why it's the parking that needs to be changed to increase the green space. They could always just also increase the square footage of the lot per dwelling to be in line with R2, which is like 7,500, I think, instead of R3, which is 3,500. I think that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. George.
Thank you.
First, I really don't want to be here.
Hang on.
Okay?
Name and address for the record.
George O'Brien, 5 Locust Street, North Salem. First, I really don't want to be here. Secondly, when I looked at the Ferris development, I thought, well, it's just another not good development. to be had by the city of Salem. But as Ann pointed out, the land around Ferris is ripe for development. The North Shore Corridor people did a great job in zoning the area, and frankly, I think they did a favor to Mr. Ferris and the people who own the land near it. 46 units is a disaster. I can't. It's my voice. 46 units is a disaster.
48.
Excuse me. Well, that's even worse. Thank you. 48 units is a disaster. 1.5 parking spaces make no sense. The development is supposed to be geared to working people. Usually there's a couple. Everybody has a car in the United States. My son lives in Jamaica Plain with his girlfriend. They have 2 cars. Jamaica Plain has even less space than the city of Salem. So 2 parking spaces is reasonable. It's particularly reasonable considering that the Juniper Point Associates is looking for a special permit to have 48 units instead of what should be, by their statements, 31. Hopefully the special permit will not pass, but the city of Salem is very good to developers. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Jane?
Jane Arlander, 93 Federal Street. Just a few points. I'm not in favor of reducing the number of parking spaces to 1.5. Let me use Riverview Place project as an example. Riverview Place project has 130 units. It, of course, has 2 parking spaces. It was permitted with 2 parking spaces per unit. It went through design review, and it was decided that because the 3 buildings on that 5.14 acre property pretty much took up most of the space, that they would build a parking garage. And the parking garage doesn't have a roof. When Mass DEP looked at the development, Mass DEP said, gee, this is so close to the river, you can't put residential units on the first floor of your main building. So they had to take those residential units out, and they decided they'd put some parking there, but they also, with the design review board's help, they had a little parking garage that was going to be in the back of the 3 buildings. And the problem is, with the parking garage, is that it doesn't have a roof. When it floods, what happens is the water is collected. It's going to go right into the sewage system, so it can't go right into the sewage system during a storm. They have to collect it, and then later on open a valve and allow the water to flow into the sewage system. The problem is I asked the question, well, when you have this problem, how many spaces in the garage are flooded? How many cars are affected? And I was told 50%. 50% of the cars. Where are they going to go? So one of the problems with the North River Canal Corridor is that the properties are different. The Ferris property and the Salem Swade are more similar in that they're right on the river, and they do flood. And so you are going to have problems, and you might want to build in extra parking for those places. I also think that when you reduce the number of parking, I think it does drive the density. Why not? You may be confined by certain dimensions, but what happened in Salem Swade when they took all the units out of the first floor? Did they decrease the number of units? No, they just made them smaller. So some of the units are just around 600 square feet. So you can get around the actual size of the property by increasing the density by just decreasing the size of the units. So those are my feelings. And I think you should think about maybe, if you're doing this, doing it on a case-by-case basis, depending on the property and whether it floods severely. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy?
I'm Judy French, 16 Foster Street. Okay. I have several small points, because regarding the subject of green space, reducing the number of spaces or adding spaces to what is proposed for the Ferris build wouldn't make much of a difference because the parking is mainly under the buildings. It doesn't, most of it is under the buildings. And I keep hearing, as far as Goodhue versus the Ferris build proposal, Goodhue is, as far as I know, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. And someone else mentioned 600 square foot at I think Flinton or wherever that was. I don't know how many of these other places are, fewer than 2, or 1 and 2, but what's proposed for Ferris is 48 units, the majority of which are 3 bedroom, and the rest of them are 2 bedroom. And that's something like, I don't have the exact figure, it's something like 38 of them out of 40, or 37 out of 48, or something like that.
Less than that.
Is, pardon me?
Less than that.
It's pretty close to that, though. What is it? It's not like, it's.
I think it's 22 beds, but I could be wrong on that.
22?
22 bedrooms. Probably.
I don't think so. Well, so I guess we're agree to not
Yeah,
know for
it's
sure.
about 22
Because I thought it was a lot closer. Okay, but as far as comparing it to the usage of the parking spaces at Goodhue to, which is 1 and 2 bedroom, to 3, and it is the majority, and 2 bedroom, at the Ferris build with 48 units, I don't think it's a fair comparison to say that, that because Goodhue isn't using, I can see why, because if I have a 2-bedroom apartment, and it's only me, and, one bedrooms are often gonna be, it could be a couple, but, just saying, I think there's a big difference. I think that a 3-bedroom apartment compares more, especially in a brand-new gorgeous build, compares more to a single-family dwelling than it does to your typical Salem apartment. And let's see. I think that the 2 parking space requirement is a good thing to keep in place, because as the woman, I don't remember her name, the pink sweater that was up here before me, suggested that there's special permitting that they're overriding things in the NRC zoning anyway, all the time. Everything I've seen, it's like override this, override that, the number of units, da-da-da-da. And the special permits allow it, but in a situation like where Ferris, where it should be taken individually, as I believe you said. And I think the Ferris build, because of its, the nice location, the number of 3-bedroom units, even despite the fact of being near the train station, and I'm one of the people that, I don't know any families that have fewer than 2 cars, as couples, I should say, and if they have a child, they have 3 cars, and even on Foster Street, which is 1 block away from Franklin Street, a good number of the people have multiple cars in a single unit. Fortunately, I have 2 of my own parking spaces off street. And the street fills up. And let's see. In the Ferris lot, the North River Canal Corridor zoning would permit 31 units. So 48 units is a great override to what would be permitted under the NRCC at 3,500 square feet per unit, of land area. Okay, let's see. I don't know how many others of the apartments or condos and apartments. I don't even know how Bell Station compares in terms of, how many 1, 2, or 3, or what other bedroom units there are, or in any of these other builds around. But I'm kind of surprised even that the Ferris build has the proposal for 3-bedroom units, because I think it's kind of it's great. I think it's wonderful. But I think there's like a sort of a leaning toward lofts and single, what do you call it, studio units and 1-bedrooms. I don't know. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just quickly, just want to mention, just for clarification, that in terms of the Salem Suede proposal, that was approved, but when that had come before the zoning board, or actually prior to with the design review board, the design review board had actually recommended that because they were designing micro apartments, that they should go to 1 space per unit. And the zoning board had actually ended up voting that down, and but that is still, I think that they're all done with their permitting, but I think that there's still some, actually they may have still some Chapter 91 issues or something. And then Councilor Turiel, you had a question.
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, just to be clear on some of this, when we're talking about the base parking requirement within the NRCC, and I've been talking about how that's, the highest parking requirement in the entire city. That's not directly tied to the density that people are applying for. When an applicant is coming before the ZBA, looking for relief on density and looking to put in higher density, that's a separate matter essentially from that parking. They're looking to put in more units than the dimensional requirements would otherwise allow. And, the Ferris property is going through this process right now. Other project proposals have. So this, if they wanted to also, if they were granted that sort of relief, they would also be going potentially for relief on the parking requirement. But the biggest thing that I just want to be clear of is, like, within this, for the benefit, mostly for the benefit of the public, we're not, in this one action that we're doing here, we're not talking directly about the Ferris property or any of the other properties or proposals that have been permitted or are being permitted. We're talking about the general requirements. So long as you have, if you have it's to have 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit, not commercial space, and anything outside, anything less than that standard, or anything if you factored in commercial properties or whatever, at that point, that's where you get into the zoning board and you're looking for, variances and relief accordingly if necessary, or you're just providing more parking with that in mind. So they're 2 different matters. The density of the Ferris property, as whether it's 31 units or 48 units or 46 or whatever, that's not directly tied to this. It does affect, the permitting process. And as all these projects go forward for permitting, especially projects like Ferris that are right on the water's edge, I think one of the things that the planning board will wind up doing in their site plan review process is, because that's something that's required, is making sure that the parking is above water, among other things. So, because I'm pretty, underground parking is generally considered nice, but underwater parking is generally considered bad. So, just to make that all clear and to kind of focus on the core issue.
Thank you. Barbara, you had your hand up, and then, sure. Sure.
I don't really want to speak to whether 1.5 spaces is sufficient or not. I just wanted to respond a little bit to what the thing that I keep hearing, which is people don't want, they want some green space, and this is supposed to provide more green space, but there's nothing in the proposed ordinance that actually requires any additional green space in exchange for less parking. We all know developers. I mean, it's it's a numbers game. It's, you have this site, if you have this much parking, the rest is going to be building. Frankly, if you reduce the parking, the rest is going to be building. So I would like the planning board to consider, you know, maybe there's some, we have no green space requirement in, particularly in NRCC. So this is just a thought, you know, so if you, because it's 1.5 spaces, maybe for every 1.5 spaces, you have half a space worth of green space. Or for every 3 spaces, you have 1 space worth of green space. So just a consideration to address some of the concerns I've heard.
Thank you. And then Kurt, you had your hand up.
Just 2 quick observations. In my experience working in San Francisco, California, Texas, Massachusetts, up and down the East Coast, mutually beneficial open space is something that can be codified and provided as a part of a calculation for open space as an offset to parking and to development. And possibly to skew this in the opposite direction, as recently as 1997, the San Francisco City Council and Planning Boards were just having the same discussion about shifting to a 1-to-1, 1 unit to 1 parking space. And as recently as 2010, the discussion shifted to half a space or 3/4 of a space. And then as recently as 2015, they have now enacted the ability to exempt all developments from any sort of minimum parking spaces. So in effect, the trend is moving across the nation to setting parking maximums or deleting parking requirements in their entirety. So just as a context beyond.
Thank you. And then Carol.
Carol Koss, 7 River Street. I think if you reduce the number of spaces, that you're not going to be guaranteed the open green space. I know that parking is a problem. I think we all know that in Salem, and particularly at Halloween and during snow emergencies. I park my car in the parking garage at the train station. I've done it 3 or 4 times this winter, and when I go to get my car at about 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning, that garage is full. There's a sign that says, "Lot is full." So we do have some kind of a parking problem in Salem. So before you reduce the number of spaces that are required, I think you need to think about that. And also, why would you bargain against yourself? Why don't you use that as a bargaining chip when the developer comes in and says, oh, you know, I want this many units, and you say, well, maybe we can reduce that amount of parking space, but you have to give this to us in return. Just a thought.
Thank you. I think. Nope, you gotta come to the microphone, please.
Ann Whittier, 10 River Street. I think if I lived in San Francisco, I might be able to go along with the parking requirement that man was speaking about, because it's a pretty, I mean, everything you want is probably in San Francisco, and if you want to go out to Point Reyes or somewhere, you rent a car perhaps for the weekend and go. But in Salem, we have 3 adults in our home. We have 3 cars. We have our own lives. We go places. We visit friends. We don't always stay right in Salem. There are other places to go on the North Shore. And, you know, I just think the argument to frame it parking spaces versus green space is not really the way it should be framed, because, like people have said, and I think it's so true, a developer will take as much, I believe, not to malign them, as they possibly can. They're trying to make money. So really the argument needs to be framed, what should the developer be allowed to do, and how much should he be able to push out into the neighborhoods where people have been living for, I've been in Salem for 47 years, and, you know, how much should that developer be able to force the parking to be worse all around his development? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Councilor Madore.
Thank you, Madam President. I think this is a really, the reduction itself, I think it's a good trend to consider moving forward in general, a reduction in parking requirements, because I would like to build housing for people rather than space for cars. especially in the NRCC area where it's transit-oriented. I do know a lot of families and young couples, including myself, will have one car in the family or have no car at all. And I take advantage of car share services like Zipcar. I take the train all the time, but most of my time is spent walking. And I think if we reduce the parking requirement, we are supporting the types of developments that would attract households that tend to have fewer cars or wouldn't want to have cars at all. Younger couples, retirees, empty nesters, they would like to ditch the car and a car or two in their families and move to places where they could walk to a lot of different amenities. All my neighbors either have no car or they keep their car at the parking spot or they have one car. And I think the idea of requiring open space in the NRCC is a really great idea to entertain. Boston does. There are lots of municipalities in Massachusetts that require open space as a set aside, and I think that would be a benefit as part of this conversation. So I do think reducing the parking requirement to meet at least our city standards in other neighborhoods would be a good idea moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Council McCarthy, you're the big winner.
Seeing no other comments, I move that the public hearing be closed.
Council McCarthy moves the public hearing be closed. All those in favor? All those opposed? Matter carries. Council McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I further move that the matter be referred to the planning board for their recommendation.
Council McCarthy moves that the matter be referred to the planning board for their recommendation. All those in favor? All those opposed? Matter carries. Okay. We are, oh my goodness, do we really? Okay, what do we want to do? 8:20, and what do we have left? We have one more left.
Yeah.
Right.
The first one.
Section 3.0?
We have, I'm sorry?
Section 3.0.
Yeah.
Section 3.0, okay.
The first page.
Zoning amendment. Okay, you guys, we're still continuing, so if you're leaving, please do so quietly.
Thank you.
Zoning Amendment, Chapter 3.0, Table of Principal and Accessory Use Regulations, amending Scrivener's errors from 2009 recodification, including allowing a dwelling above first-floor retail, service, or office in B1 zone, allowing by right clubs, indoor commercial recreation, service, plumbing, carpentry, sheet metal, restaurants, manufacturing, storage, research, development, and adult daycare in industrial zone, allowing by special permit outdoor commercial recreation accessory structures in industrial zone.
Tom and Tom.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. So item A in this section pertains to the B1 zoning district, and items B, C, and D are for the industrial zone. And Tom and I, after this was submitted, became aware of errors in the I section, so we're recommending that this be continued so that we can address those. But I think Tom's going to speak about the item A, which is the Scrivener's errors in the B1 zoning district.
So in the previous edition of the zoning, pre-2009, the B1 allowed use, if you will allow me, I'll read the allowed uses. So number one was all uses that are permitted in the R3 district, subject to all provisions specified for each use. Number two is grocery, fruit, vegetable, and meat stores and delicatessens. Number three is bakeries, provided all baked goods are sold at retail on the premises only. Number four is drugstores. Number five is liquor stores, beer and wine for consumption off the premises. Number six is newsstands and variety stores. Number seven is dry goods and notion stores. Number eight is books, stationery, and gift stores. Number 9 is florist shops, but excluding greenhouses. Number 10 is hardware stores. Number 11 is banks and savings loans institutions. Number 12 is barber shops and beauty parlors. Number 13 is laundry, dry cleaning, pressing establishments, provided more than 5 persons are engaged in providing such services. Self-service laundries. Number 15 is tailor and custom dressmaking shops. Number 16 is shoe repair. Number 17 is radio, television, appliance repair. also limiting number of people. Number 18 is professional offices, medical and dental clinics. Number 19 is restaurants and other eating places which do not serve alcoholic beverages consumed on the premise, including drive-in restaurants. Number 20 is municipal buildings. Number 21 is off-street parking and loading facilities and other accessory uses in buildings, provided that such uses are clearly incidental to the principal use. So the point of all that was that there was many, many small traditional stores and shops that were allowed in one district. And the way our zoning is written now, none of that's allowed. And I don't think that was the intent. I think it was an error.
Okay, Councilor Turiel.
Thank you, Madam President. So we'll continue this as we already discussed, but, you know, section 1A here is probably the easiest of these decisions to make from my view, at least, on this. The B1, the traditional use of the B1, if you look at the areas that it exists in, are places like Derby Street, Boston Street, Jefferson Avenue, a couple of areas in Lafayette Street, and these B1 zones are exactly neighborhood retail, where you have a retailer of some sort, a restaurant. In my case, I think I mentioned earlier, I live directly opposite a B1 block, and in that B1, in the first floor, is a variety store and package store and a fast food, a fast takeout restaurant. And they've been there forever, and right above them are several floors of apartments. And that's an extremely typical use. Most of what happens on Derby Street would be technically illegal if this use, if this end stood. So, I think, the real intent of neighborhood business is to allow these sort of neighborhood businesses. So this part of it will be I think will be fairly easy. The rest of it generates a lot of questions.
Thank you. Councilor Sargent.
I second continuing the hearing and just add this to the ad hoc committee for review. Please.
Wait, what? What, there wasn't
Yeah, I didn't make a motion.
There wasn't a motion.
I'm making that motion, that we continue this and add it to the ad hoc committee for review.
Second.
Without continuing discussion about it?
Oh, we can, yeah, you can always continue discussion, even after seconded it, yeah.
Okay, so continuing discussion. Okay, Councilor McCarthy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since we're all here, and I agree with Section A, there might be a couple of tweaks, but in Section B, within zoning district I, do you have specifically, do you have a list of which ones that you want to, or some of these, like all the ones that are in the table, those definitely Scrivener's errors, or are you not sure at this point?
As my cohort explained, there was enough, the old book is very confusing on the industrial section.
sure
And
it is.
even when we talked about it tonight, there was some confusion. So if you don't mind, we'd like to push that conversation off. But we would like to, if it's okay with you guys, to talk a little bit about the B1, just because I know there are some people that came here tonight for the purpose of talking about B1, and maybe we can exhaust that and address the industrial in the next meeting.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Okay, so then we're just going to talk about Section A then?
It's up to you guys, but yeah.
And then, okay, so hold off until, on Section B, C, and D until next meeting.
Continue the whole thing, but discuss A. We'd continue the whole thing, but discuss A, right? Let's have some discussion of A now.
Okay. Councilors, any other, Councilor Madore?
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to mention the Bridge Street Neck area, especially in the entrance corridor between, starting at the bottom of Bridge Street Neck in the B1 district. I think a lot of the uses we see right now, the residential use above and neighborhood retail in the bottom, is existing. And we've seen a lot of changes in that district specifically, where a lot of these neighborhood retail is being flipped over to residential, and that takes away from the character that's been historically tied to the neighborhood. And I think this would definitely support in some way through zoning to encourage investors to keep the mix of uses, because right now, even though we allow the the commercial uses, we're not saying that residential use is allowed by right, even though we allow by right, the mixed use itself is still restricted to some dimensional requirements, but I think this is a good small step to take to make sure we keep the neighborhood character that is, makes that area very attractive to current and future residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other counselors?
I just make a little comment on,
Councilor Schaefer.
I understand what's allowed in the B1 zone, but sometimes people don't realize you have to make choices. They sometimes think you can take one of each, and that would be way too much. And what I mean is if you have 4 stores with just enough parking for the 4 stores, yes, you could put residential up to R3 density there, but if you don't have any parking, you can't do that. If you get limited, there has to be the proper setbacks, height, and all the other rules involved also. You can't take that limited parking and say, I'm gonna put first floor, retail stores, second floor offices, third floor residential. You have to have everything else involved as far as setbacks and all that, or apply for 15 variances as some projects seem to go by, but, you have to also be a good neighbor to the resident that's abutting you also, if that be the case. If there's R1 or R2 behind you, you have to keep them in mind. So just sometimes people think you can put almost anything in here together, and it all can't fit in one building. Thank you.
I could just remind the board, this was a Scrivener's error, we feel. And we're just trying to rectify that. If the desire is to change that zoning, again, there's a different process, but this was something that we felt was allowed previously, and this new zoning amendment prohibited it.
Thank you. Any other counselors? Seeing none. Planning board members, any comments? Okay. From public, I'll just go this way. Barbara.
Hope you don't get sick. I didn't want to be here either, but here we are. Sadly. So one thing I'd like to say is that we've had like 4 zoning amendments in the past couple of years. We have not had one public informational meeting prior to the public hearing. And I do not understand why, with this level of changes, the planning department couldn't simply say, we're going to have a public meeting, anybody can come and we can talk about it. I feel like it's a waste of the planning board's time that these things haven't been ironed out, the public hasn't been heard. The only time you get to speak is you're hearing and you're listening and you're saying, oh, I didn't know that explanation. So I would encourage the city council in the future, when you get a request, to say, ask that there be a public informational hearing first. That being said, I have no problem with residential above commercial in B1, especially if you're going to look at the dimensional requirements. I am totally confused by the Scrivener's error. And I'm confused that we just read a definition of what is allowed in B1 when we took all those out in the zoning recodification of 2000. That's when we got the tables. And since I don't never clean my basement, I found my files, most of them, and we went through these zoning tables. There was a committee, there was Mark Bobrowski. We marked them up. I have them here. We marked them up over and over again. I don't understand what zoning you're talking about. Are you talking about the 1996 zoning? What's the previous zoning? So I think we need much more understanding about why these are Scrivener's errors. I see no evidence. Thank you.
Do either of you want to address that, or?
I thought my explanation was pretty clear. In our reading of this, it was allowed before the 2009 recodification, wrong word, and it's not allowed currently. So in that effect, they changed zoning without the proper hearing, because the whole intent of that thing was only to codify the code. It wasn't to change zoning. And either things were taken advantage of to change zoning, or what we feel is most of it was just by omission, that things were just left out. and they've come to light over the years.
Okay, hang on, I need you to come up. We got to record you.
So are you saying the Scrivener's errors took place in the 2000 recodification? When did they take place?
Through the chair.
Yes.
The recodification, or whatever you guys call it, was done in 2009.
Well, what about the 2000 recodification, which has all these tables that was voted on?
2009 was when we switched from this document to the current document.
Why are all my materials
I don't know.
dated 2000? From Mark Rubowski.
Okay, maybe this should be an offline discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I'm just, but I do think before the council accepts the fact that these are Scrivener's errors, these questions should be answered.
Thank you. Noah?
Can I just clarify something that you're saying that for everybody's benefit?
Sure.
So when people are talking about how there needs to be more discussion about this, how for these errors there needs to be additional review, that we're making all these changes, or we're suggesting we make all these changes without proper review, what you're actually saying is that when the document was transferred, what we're now suggesting that we change was basically done without review by accident, and that all we're doing now is putting back things in the way that they were prior to the clerical mistake. Right?
I think I've said that several times tonight.
All right, I just want to make sure that's clear.
Yeah.
So basically, we're not talking, there are two different things before us. There's Scrivener's errors and there's changes. For the Scrivener's errors, we're not talking about changing things without any level of review. What we're talking about is correcting a mistake where things were accidentally changed without any level of review. So we're going back to the way things were with the proper review. I just want to make sure that's clear.
Thank you. Okay, Councilor Terrio, then Justin.
Thank you. And just really, really quickly on top of that, I would point out that, where for any zoning change that we make, whether it be to correct what we decree to be a Scrivener's error, or to make a change of any sort, that's just an edit to our zoning tables, we do have a process for doing that. We do have a public process. It involves advertising. It involves the joint public hearing, where we ask questions about it, listen to the public's input as well, and the planning board does that with us, and they take that into account when they prepare their opinion. They submit it back to us. We, at that point, may modify it further or choose to act on it or choose to not act on it, but that is a very well-defined public process. When you talk about individual projects that involve variances, involve zoning, there's generally a process associated with them as well. And in many of those cases, there are also public meetings for those particular projects, because the developer does usually want to have the neighborhoods, in most cases, they want the neighbor's support ultimately for what they do. So it's not like these are changes that are just happening, in the middle of the night. These are fairly well-defined process, and we've already decided on this. We're taking several of these matters, and we're going to do further work on them, and we're going to continue these hearings. So there are things that are so big, like a full recodification, that you do have a much more involved public process. But this is not that, I guess.
Thank you. Justin, you were next, and then Councilor Sargent. And then
Justin, would you attend River Street? I think what was being got at there was that you're talking now about having a working group to talk about some of these matters that came up tonight. So obviously details were raised tonight which are going to require further consideration. Useful details were brought up tonight, which is going to delay this matter. So I think that speaks to the usefulness of having some prior informational session, to Barbara's point. But my concern about the Scrivener's errors is just a process question here. I mean, they're being called errors and accidents, but it strikes me that if, a genuine accident is random, and yet what we have here is essentially things that were all no, I guess one Board of Appeals, and they're all being made by right, except maybe one. So that doesn't strike me as being accident. It's sort of strange credulity that it would be. that these errors all happen to be in one direction and they're going the other way. Maybe it's not the case. Maybe there were a larger selection of errors that were genuinely random, and these are being selected from those, and that accounts for that. But even if that's the case, I think people would want to know why these have been selected. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Tyler.
All right, Tyler Terry, 22 School Street. This is the only one that I'm actually prepared for. So this is for dwelling units above retail, and he read off a list of like what should be allowed for retail, not necessarily the dwelling above it. Currently, it's allowed in B5, and I have the old version of the zoning ordinance, and it looks like the allowed in B5 comes from, doesn't have very good section numbers, but number 16 for the old version of B5 allowed by right says one family, two family, and multifamily residence uses as primary uses in townhouses, row houses, flats, or multi-story arrangements, including high-rises, and as secondary use in upper floors of structures primarily used for retail, personal, services, or office purposes. So it seems like that is the reason why it was justified as by right in B5. And he went over the list of what's by right in B2, and that was kind of missing. But there's, again, how he says often that it was kind of weird where it says, oh, everything that's allowed in this other zone is also allowed. For special permit in B1, I'm sorry if I said B2 this whole time. For special permit in B2, it's everything that's also allowed by special permit in R3. In R3, by special permit, looks like number 6. It's this huge long thing. It might be for dwellings above retail. Let's see. What does it say? I don't like reading out loud. Notwithstanding the specifically excluded list of uses specified in paragraphs B and C of this section, certain other uses will be allowed by special permit for certain multifamily complexes. Therefore, multifamily apartment buildings and developments complying with the following basic minimum requirements may have the hereinafter permissive special permit uses built and occupied as part of the development. It's really long, and then it goes on to list a bunch of types of shops that could be on the first floor.
Where are you going with this?
Not by right, but by special permit in B1 for dwellings above retail.
You support special permit?
Special permit, but not by right.
Got it. Okay, anyone else?
If I could just
Yeah.
respond to that, if you don't mind, and not to belabor this discussion. The point when I read those uses was the number one use was those uses allowed in R3, which is multifamily residential. In addition to that were all those commercial uses. So there's nothing prohibiting you from combining those uses. That's where we get the allowed use in the B1, and that's why we think that the new recodified document is not correct. It's as simple as that. What I do want to close my comments with, you guys can do what you want, is that regardless of the errors and mistakes that were made in this book, it is 30 times better than our old zoning document. Everything, as this gentleman just mentioned, it references back to section before with a few exceptions, and then it continues. That's why we felt the need to do this and go through this whole book. This one was the most unworkable document you've ever seen. I worked with it for 10 years, and I wasn't a master of that. No one was. It was just, every time you read it or read the special permit section, it read a little bit differently. It was open to interpretation. So as imperfect as this one may be, 10 times, 30 times better than the old one. So we're just still trying to tweak it and still trying to get it as good as we can.
Okay, thank you. Any more? Councilor McCarthy?
There's no further discussion. I move that the public hearing be left open
Okay, Council McCarthy moves that the public hearing be left open.
We already made a motion and
Oh, yeah,
seconded
we
it
did.
that it be left open and be referred to the ad hoc committee.
Or-
There isn't an ad hoc committee.
Right, we don't have one yet, so we can't
isn't one. We
refer
haven't
it
formed one
to
yet.
that. So we
Right
just
now,
have
we
to
continue
leave it
to a date
open.
certain.
And then we'll discuss dates certain after. Okay, so Council McCarthy,
How about May 8th?
May 8th?
I'm picking dates. We're,
Okay, wait, can we just do your motion to leave this open?
Yep.
Okay, so,
Might I suggest possibly a Monday night, in case we have to do a council order the next day to do anything from a meeting, that we can have time
May
by
7th.
11 o'clock the next day. Sounds good. If possible.
sure. I see no disagreement with efficiency. Okay, so Council McCarthy has a motion to keep the public hearing open. All those in favor? All those opposed? That carries. Councilor Terrio.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that this be continued to a date certain of May 7th, 2018 at 6 PM.
Planning Board, can you do that?
Of course.
Okay. What was,
What's your list?
wait.
I'm going by the calendar.
Yeah, okay,
I'm just
so I
picking up
think
the
that when
calendar.
we had talked about this, that when I think I had mentioned tonight, I think I had mentioned the 17th. The problem is that we have two members that have a neighborhood meeting on the 17th, so that's why we ended up going with this one rather than the 17th.
I had a neighborhood meeting tonight, but I came in.
Okay.
Your battles.
April 30th?
That's fine.
Do we,
I'll amend my motion if that's amenable to everybody.
April 30th?
Is it Friday?
That'd be Monday, April 30th.
Monday, April 30th. Okay, do we all, planning board can make it? We all can make it? Are we good?
What's the date, please, again?
May 30th.
April.
Oh my God. Oh my God, that'll be in the middle of budget hearings. Yeah, in the middle of budget hearings. Let's
Yeah,
do that
that'll
too. Oh my God, no. April 30th, 6 PM, be here. And so, hang on, so Council McCarthy.
Thank you. There've been multiple references tonight about an ad hoc committee. I would suggest those people that want to form that ad hoc committee get an order in prior to the deadline of noon tomorrow, so it's on the agenda, so we can debate the formation of the ad hoc committee on Thursday to allow them 2 weeks to meet prior to the April 30th date that everyone just agreed to.
Okay.
That was
Did
me.
we all hear that?
Yep.
Okay. So we are gonna vote on,
Yes, on the motion.
you motioned for April 30th, 6 PM. Okay, all those in favor? All those opposed? Matter carried. April 30th, 6 PM. We will
Madam
be,
President, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
we'll be back here. Counselor Sargent.
Might I just bring up a suggestion that, while we have the planning board here, and because of the fact that when we close the public hearing, the public isn't allowed to talk at the planning board meeting. And I did some reading, and I mentioned it before, it is within our purview and legal to have a public hearing with the city council and then refer it to the planning board for their public hearing. And the difference there would be, we'd have a public hearing on something, and when it's referred to them, they'd have a public hearing where the public could still speak. So you can have two meetings where the city council closes their public hearing, then sends it to planning board, and they can have a public hearing.
You can't.
And that's, yes, we can.
No, you can't.
We, look up the laws, and you'll see that it's possible.
Council McCarthy.
And if that's legal, I'd like to just think about doing that in the future, because it's difficult to have people come from a planning board meeting and say they're not allowed to ask questions because we've closed the public hearing. So that, if that's possible, I'd like to look at that in the future.
Okay, Council McCarthy.
I don't want to belabor the point. We've had this discussion before.
Please
Yeah.
don't.
That's why we sit in a room with both of us, both bodies here.
Yep.
In order to, let the public come and talk. Unfortunately, we don't go, we can't go to their meeting. They have their meeting, they take what they've heard, they talk to them, so they make a recommendation back to. That's how the process works.
Right,
Unless
and
there's
then
been
we
some
debate
change
it.
at the state level that I'm not aware of, we follow the rules that have been set forth that come back to us over the whole timeline of how this process has to lay out. As we just did, we didn't leave this open-ended. We referred it to a date certain, which is required by the law.
Right.
So when we have a public hearing, the public hearing for this whole thing is now with the two bodies in the chamber and anyone's able to attend. So unless there's been a change, I would agree if there's been a change, but if there hasn't been a change to the state law, then we have to follow the state law with regard to zoning, which we have been doing.
Okay.
Madam President?
More than
Yes,
one way to
Councilor
follow that.
Terrell.
Thank you, Madam President. I would also like to point out that in this format that we've been using since long before I got into this office, this allows people with concerns or questions to be able to address all parties at the same time, all officials with anything to do with it, the city council and the planning board. So all bodies take this feedback into account in their deliberations. So it's a chance for anybody in the public to not have to go to countless meetings in order to make the same point over and over. They can address it to everybody at the same time, and then we move, so.
Thank you. Councilor Fury.
Madam President, motion to adjourn.
Councilor Fury motions to adjourn. We are adjourned.